I've been speaking to people here in Monmouth, which, as you can see, is very, very quiet this morning. Of course, the vast majority of the shops are shut. And one man said the overriding mood here, he thinks, is one of resignation. People do feel annoyed that their freedoms have once again been curtailed. But, you know, as this man said to me, well, we'll have to see if it works to bring case numbers down. I think there are a few interesting aspects to this. Firstly, we understand there's going to be police patrols on the border between Wales and England. I mean, that is quite a remarkable thought, really. But Gloucestershire Police have said that they are going to be patrolling routes in and out of Wales, between Wales and the Forest of Dean. They're going to be asking drivers why they're crossing the border. And they say if people are travelling from Wales into England and can't give a valid excuse for their journey, they'll be taking down details and passing those details on to police here in Wales so that those people can be fined. So this really, really strict. And also the Welsh Government is having to defend a move where it's told shops that can remain open, so some supermarkets, that they have to stop selling non-essential items. And we have seen pictures on social media of certain non-essential items, so clothing, for example, being sealed off or taken off the shelves so people simply can't buy it. Now, the Welsh Government says that's because, for example, clothes shops have to close during this lockdown, and it's only fair that traders should be on an even footing with one another. But other people are saying, you know, it's back to shopping trolley police. And, you know, here in Wales, it does really feel like we're going back to March, April time, and people only allowed to leave their homes for a very small number of reasons for the next 2 weeks, including critical work, buying food and exercise. It really is back to lockdown here. On a grey autumn day in Monmouth, it felt like March all over again. Food shopping is allowed, but not much else. And as people went into supermarkets, they found large sections cordoned off. Pans, kettles, even books off limits. The Welsh Government said it was to maintain a level playing field when many shops selling the same items had been forced to close. But while sales of socks were banned, Halloween decorations and advent calendars were available, leaving many shoppers confused and annoyed.
We think the Welsh Government has lost the plot, to be honest.
Absolutely, it's ridiculous.
In North Wales, one man decided to take matters into his own hands, pulling off the covers that had been placed over clothes. In a post on social media, he claimed it was inhuman to deny the public clothing. On almost deserted high streets, business owners fear the losses this lockdown will bring. Damien Cole has had to close 31 of his mobile phone shops across Wales.
All it's doing is going to drive more and more business to the big online retailers. It isn't going to help the smaller retailers based in Wales.
But despite the hit to already struggling businesses, there are plenty here who support the lockdown.
With the hospitals stretched the way they are, I think it does need to be done.
It's really good. It's absolutely needed. I work for the NHS and we've had personal loss as well.
We're unlikely to know if this lockdown will work until after it's lifted. It means people have no choice but to put their faith in the Welsh Government's strategy, however strict it might seem. At the same time, they know life goes on across the border, a United Kingdom divided on how best to beat coronavirus. Becky Johnson, Sky News on the Welsh border.
And Becky joins me now live from Chepstow in Monmouthshire. So Becky, day one, what's the mood there?
Do you know, I'd say that people here in Wales are genuinely divided over this firebreaker lockdown. Remember when the First Minister Mark Drakeford announced it, and he said that it was needed to prevent the NHS here becoming overwhelmed because case numbers are rising so quickly. And as you saw in my report, there are plenty of people in Wales who agree that this is the right strategy for the country to be taking and support this conservative approach to dealing with coronavirus that's been taken throughout the pandemic by the Welsh Labour government. But there are many, and those scenes in supermarkets where items deemed non-essential were covered up are angry by the strict measures that have been taken, that many say are even stricter than what they saw back in March. And in the last few hours, a petition has been set up calling on the government to reverse the decision to to allow supermarkets to sell goods that are deemed non-essential. Now, that petition's already got over 20,000 signatures, and it calls on the Welsh Government. It says we do not agree this is a prudent or rational measure and will create more harm than good. And they pick particularly on the idea that clothing can't be bought. They say we do not agree, for example, that parents should be barred from buying clothes for their children during lockdown while out shopping. This is disproportionate and cruel, and we ask that the decision be reversed immediately. There has been quite an outcry on social media about those things. People saying, for goodness sakes, you might need to buy a kettle in the next couple of weeks in Wales. How can a kettle be deemed a non-essential item? I think this debate will continue to rage, and of course we won't know whether this lockdown has worked maybe until a couple of weeks after it's lifted, and therefore there is going to be debate throughout this period over whether this should be happening in Wales, especially as we're not seeing similar measures being taken just across the border in England. But I think really people here, they've got no choice but to follow these measures. I think though that the measures in supermarkets are what have made people particularly angry, particularly if they weren't convinced that this was the right move for the country at this time.
OK, interesting. Becky, thanks very much.